Good afternoon, everyone. It's thrilling to be back again in person to do this event, I think after a gap of 3 years. Delighted to welcome you all to the 69th Annual Chicago Booth Management Conference. It's especially exciting to welcome our alumni who are here celebrating their reunions as part of Reconnect Weekend, including alums who celebrated their reunions virtually in 2020 and 2021. And then in addition, to honor the class of 2020, who didn't have a graduation in person due to COVID, we're actually doing a makeup in-person graduation for them tomorrow, or on Sunday, sorry. So, which is, I think, wonderful. So we're honored to have Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot here, whom I'll introduce in just a bit, to join me in a keynote conversation about the future of business in Chicago. After the luncheon, we'll go to the Gleacher Center, and we have an amazing lineup of breakout sessions led by booth faculty and alumni. So before we start, just wanted to thank so many alumni leaders. We have university trustees here. We have booth council members. Want to thank all the reunion volunteers who helped draw attendance and create this amazing weekend. And the many, many alumni ambassadors who have done so much to help build our brand in every market around the globe. So given that we're going to be, we have lots to talk about, I'm just going to launch right in and introduce our keynote speaker, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Mayor Lightfoot, following a historic election, has had a very ambitious agenda of expanding opportunity and inclusive economic growth across Chicago's neighborhoods. She's done a wide variety of things, including landmark ethics and good governance reform, worker protection legislation, closing a record $1.2 billion budget gap, and putting together one of the most progressive and forward-looking budgets in the city's history. Prior to this role, Mayor Lightfoot has held a wide variety of positions. I'll give you just a sample. Senior equity partner in the Litigation and Conflict Resolution Group at Mayor Brown, President of the Chicago Police Board, Chair of the Police Accountability Task Force, Chief of Staff and General Counsel of the Chicago Office of Emergency Management and Communications, and Assistant U.S. Attorney. Mayor Lightfoot is a native of Ohio, has been in Chicago since 1986, and lives with their wife, Amy Eshelman, and their daughter, and she's an alumna of the University of Chicago Law School. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Lori Lightfoot. So I'll have some questions, and then we'll have questions teed up by the audience as well. So given the events of the past couple of years, big cities across the U.S. are facing similar challenges, issues related to labor, housing, crime, and so on. What do you see as the key challenges Chicago is facing, and how are you thinking about economic recovery for the city?
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. Always happy to do things to support my alma mater, and great to see all of you here. Look, I think we've been thinking about recovery really since April of 2020. I don't think anybody believed that with the onset of this global pandemic, that 2 years on, we'd still be talking about it, but here we are. But back in April of 2020, we assembled a small team internally and started thinking about how do we recover. How do we recover economically, but also how do we recover as a city? Because what we were seeing is our social safety net was being shredded and challenged in a number of other profound ways. So we put together a recovery task force. That task force issued its report in June of 2020, which was the first kind of blueprint for cities to recover in the city. And we've been really trying to execute that with fidelity. We've been leaning into, I think, the core strengths of what is, I think, invariably the most diverse economy in the country. And we had a phenomenal 2021, which I'll share a few of those statistics about. So we're really thinking about this in a very holistic way. Our main strengths are manufacturing, TD&L, life sciences, arts and culture, I think, gets short shrift, but that is a huge, powerful economic engine for us, and food and agriculture. Let me brag about the latter for a second. 5 years or so ago, we had about 80 food and ag companies in Chicago. We now have over 400, and we are leading the nation in the strengths of that industry alone, among others. We're obviously a tier one tech community, and we've got to do a better job of making sure that we tell that story but we want to make sure that the folks that are graduating from Booth, that are graduating from the engineering schools here and in Urbana, realize that there's great lucrative careers, right here in the city of Chicago, and they don't need to go to the coast. So we've been spreading that gospel everywhere we can and trying to establish, frankly, a deeper relationship with schools like Booth so that your students that then become graduates know that not only can you stay in Chicago to have a great and interesting career, you can live in a great city that's affordable, that has all of the earmarks of a great global city because we are. So looking forward to the future, well, let me tell you a little bit about 2021, which makes me so optimistic about what our future is. Just to give you a couple of data points, we've consistently had the lowest unemployment rate of any major city in the country. Last year, in 2021, we had $9 billion of investment, $7 billion of it in venture capital, which broke a record from the previous year that was $2.8 billion, and put us ahead of Seattle for number 4 in the country for investment. We are always leading in foreign investment year after year. We had 173 companies make what we call pro-Chicago decisions. That means people who came to Chicago from elsewhere in the country, and these are businesses like Kimberly-Clark, like leading pharmaceutical life sciences companies that literally could pick anywhere in the globe to be, but they picked Chicago. And then we had another 100 companies that are Chicago-based, but substantially expanded their footprint in Chicago. So our future, from an economic standpoint, I think looks very, very bright. We've hit the ground running in 2022, and our goal as a city government is frankly to be your partner in business. When we have industry sector conversations, whether it's life sciences, whether it's food and ag, whether it's technology, fintech, manufacturing, and so forth, the thing that we ask is, what can we do as a city government to help? How can we make sure that what you're doing is highlighted, and marketing? How can we make sure that you've got that great pipeline for talent that everybody is struggling a little bit to get? So I think we've made great strides and really understanding and put our ear to the ground and listening to our business community in a way that we haven't before.
So you mentioned the pandemic and how it's continuing 2 years sort of after it began. And so one of the consequences is many workers, many companies haven't gone back into the office fully. Hybrid work arrangements are becoming sort of the new normal, at least for now. As you think about the future of the workplace, how do you think about the implications for companies and for Chicago?
Well, that is one of the things that we're probably most in conversation with myself and our team. And let me introduce Samir Mayakar. Now, he's a Northwestern grad, but we won't hold that against him. But Samir is Deputy Mayor for Neighborhood and Economic Development. And he and the team in World Business Chicago, Mark Tebby is here, who really does everything tech for us. We have these conversations all the time, and there's no one right answer. I'm old school and grew up in a law firm where being present made a huge difference. I was saying before we started that some of the best cases that I worked on over the arc of my career, and particularly as a young lawyer, was somebody walking down the hall, seeing that I was there and saying, hey, I just got this new matter in, do you want to help? I think that's hard to replicate that experience, particularly for younger workers, when you're on a Zoom, and where you've not built those personal relationships. Just the personal relationships, building that collegiality, and frankly, we learn a lot by reading people's body language. All of that is really difficult to do over Zoom, but nonetheless, I think a lot of today's workers want that option to be hybrid. So we've heard everything from some folks who are saying, nope, you got to come back 5 days a week, this is our culture, to the other end of the spectrum saying, you can work from wherever you want as long as the work is getting done, or some kind of hybrid of that, which is, it's really going to be team and division specific. But selfishly as a city, we want people to come back downtown. And frankly, this week is back to work week. And we've been spending time all across the city welcoming workers back. We've done United, we've done Google, we've done some of the the other companies, and frankly, the smaller businesses, whether it's the coffee shop, the dry cleaner, the shoe shine person, the lunch spot, they've missed you, and they want you back. Because their businesses are really dependent upon those office towers being fully populated. But I think we're still evolving and not arrived at where we're going to be. But businesses really have to make that decision for themselves. I can tell you for the city, it's a challenge for us as well. Obviously, we don't have all the amenities and perks and salary comp that private sector does. So we've got to be much more nimble in thinking about how we manage our workforce as well.
So Mayor, back in 2020, along with the pandemic, you had the murder of George Floyd and all the events that followed. And so the conversations about issues with racism, discrimination, economic inequality came really into the fore. And these had been matters of great concern, obviously, but they took on higher priority, urgency during that time. How have you thought about these issues of disparity and equity across Chicago and its neighborhood?
Well, it's the reason I ran for office. I saw us becoming more and more a tale of multiple cities, not just two cities. And I think that was really holding us back in pretty significant ways. One of my signature economic development initiatives, really led by Samir and his team, is called Invest Southwest. And if you know the city of Chicago, the South Side and the West Side are majority black and brown neighborhoods. And for way too long, decades really, there hasn't been the kind of investment in those communities that they deserved. And as I said to many audiences, and I'll say it here, neglect is not cost-free. We pay a price for that. It shows up in the amount of money that we've got to spend in policing, because when you don't have economic development opportunity in neighborhoods, people still have to eat. They still have to feed their families. And if the only economy that's left in a neighborhood is the illegal economy driven by the drug trade, where violence always follows, that's what people are going to take advantage of. I want young people in our city, no matter what zip code and no matter what the circumstances that they're born into, to feel like they are part of this great, dynamic, vibrant, global city. But if they don't see it in their neighborhoods, they're not going to feel it and they're not going to experience it. And I'm a big believer that you can't be what you can't see. So our focus from day one has been on really living the values of equity and inclusion, making those investments in neighborhoods that have been starved, and making sure that those kids and their families have the support that they need to be able to thrive and truly realize their God-given talent. Because if we don't do that, we still pay for it. But we pay for it in a way that frankly doesn't give us any kind of return on our investment. We're just putting Band-Aids over big systemic problems. So not only have we done economic investment, we are making a bold bet in affordable housing. We made a big announcement of $1 billion affordable housing plan just this last December. And the thing that I'm most proud, you can clap for that. And the thing that I'm most proud about that is we are taking steps to break down the segregation that has held this city back for far too long, because a lot of that $1 billion is going to be going into neighborhoods that historically, frankly, haven't been welcoming of affordable housing options. But we've got to have economic diversity as well as racial and ethnic diversity in all of our neighborhood. The segregation holds us back because it breeds so many parochial interests and so many detrimental things to our city. So I could go on, but I'll stop there. But it's trust and believe that equity and inclusion is our North Star, and we're living those values every single day.
So Mayor, public safety is an issue that's on the minds of everybody. It's in, again, many big cities across the country. It's been an issue over the last couple of years. Could you talk a little bit about how the city wants to address this issue?
Well, look, we focus on public safety every single day. It is the issue. And when I talk to mayors, my fellow mayors across the city, big and small cities, it is their primary issue as well. We are experiencing, I think, an historical moment in public safety. But I'm happy to report that Chicago is making progress. We're not at our destination point by a long shot, but we're down on homicides, we're down on shootings, and we focused on 15 neighborhoods And why those 15 is it's 50%, they drive 50% of our violent crime. And in those 15 areas, I'm happy to report that we've really seen monumental progress. 20, 30% down in shootings and homicide in almost every single one of those neighborhoods. And what have we done differently there? What we've done is what we call the whole of government approach. And look, public safety isn't something that can just fall upon the shoulders of policing. That doesn't work. That's a failed strategy, and we've got 30, 40 years of data to prove that. And it sets the police department, frankly, up for failure. They are not and cannot be well situated to deal with the lack of parenting that is existing in some of our neighborhoods, drug addiction, and some of the social fabric issues that have been left to the police by default, but really are better suited to be solved by people who are actually the experts and professionals. So our whole of government approach is this. We go into neighborhoods talking to the indigenous population there, using data to understand better what are the needs, what are the gaps, and how can those gaps be filled, certainly by city resources, but also what do we need to do to engage the business sector, the philanthropic sector. And by doing that and taking that approach, we've seen incredible progress in violence in those neighborhoods. And really, we think that this is the model of modern public safety, community safety work. It's got to be a whole of government approach. The police obviously play a very valuable and important role, but we need to make sure that we're also using the strength of our soft power in providing housing, mental health services, supports for young people, supports for families. The list goes on, and I think you get it. But when we do that, and we're intentional about using the data and making the right kind of investments, and at the earliest possible stage in young people's lives, not just in high school, it's not too late then, but it's much harder. If we're investing in our families and neighborhoods, really from birth to third grade, that is where we're going to have the biggest impact. And that's the investments that we're starting to make in city that I think will pay off in the long term.
Switch topics a little bit. We hear a lot about companies moving to places like Florida and Texas, and more also now socio-political issues are popping up there, which have put those places at odds with the companies that have relocated, having CEOs having to deal with public backlash from the government. Where do you see Chicago fitting in on the spectrum? Is this a way to get some businesses back, perhaps?
Well, look, this is complicated stuff. But I do think that businesses are really starting to think about where they are situated. It is really profoundly unfortunate, the current state of our democracy. There's way too much toxicity in our debate. There's way too much toxicity in our politics. It's not helping our democracy. The divide and demonizing approach that frankly it's not unique to one end of the spectrum or another. It is a losing strategy for us going forward. So we've got to think about ways in which we bring people together, and certainly thinking about what's happening in some southern states, I just look at that with distress. And the fact that not only are they going after adults who share different sensibilities, but now what we're seeing is they're going after children. And I just think that's shameful. So, of course, as a city that doesn't reflect that end of the spectrum, we are speaking our values, and we're being very loud and clear about it. We did some things through World Business Chicago that were tongue-in-cheek and kind of going after Texas, but now these stakes are really high. They are literally deadly serious. With the news this week coming out of the draft opinion that was leaked, and let me just say as a lawyer, I'm appalled that that draft decision is leaked. That should never, ever, ever happen. But it has. The court has acknowledged that this was a real draft, not a final decision. But I'm disheartened, frankly, not just by the decision. I'm a Democrat, I'm pro-choice, I make no bones about that. But the mean-spiritedness in the content of that decision. And I will tell you, as a gay woman, saying that my rights are phony rights, I take great offense at that. And so we're not going to be shy about speaking our values to the nation and talking about why Chicago will always be a welcoming city, but also a safe haven. So people can live their lives without government telling them who they are, what they should be, what books they can read. I mean, I'm just despairing for our democracy right now.
Mayor, let's talk about the budget. You passed your recovery budget back in October. Could you talk about the highlights, where the money is going?
Sure. Well, look, I've said this to folks. We have more resources available to us as a city government right now, maybe ever, but certainly since probably during the time of the Great Depression. I call this our WPA moment. We've got transformational resources. I think this is a transformational moment, and our challenge as a city government is, will we rise to the occasion with transformational policies and procedures and programs to meet the needs of our residents, many of whom are still hurting. They were hurting before the pandemic, they're hurting now even more, and I think the answer has to be, yes, we will. So we've done a couple of things. Number one, as I mentioned, we are weighing in heavily on affordable housing. Because if you don't have a safe place, an affordable place to lay your head at night, that then has a cascading and I think dangerous effect on the rest of people's lives. So we've got to make sure that our residents have affordable, stable housing. We walked into office 3 years ago with about 120,000 unit deficit, and we're doing everything we can to shrink that number. Not surprisingly, we also have to make investments in our infrastructure. And we actually passed a capital plan way before the federal plan because city government had been doing these things on a yearly basis. The reality is, when you've got bridges that are in the state that they're in, not only in Chicago, but in the state of Illinois, our roads, our sidewalks, all the things that people depend upon that are in a state of disarray because of deferred maintenance going back decades, we need a multi-year plan. So we passed and floated a bond to give us a 5-year runway to get done what needed to get done. We're in year 2 of that, and I think you're starting to see a lot of progress across our city. So infrastructure is key. We've also got to, as I said before, invest in public safety. We've got to make sure that our police department continues on its pathway of reforms, but we've got to hire more officers, and particularly officers that reflect the diversity of our neighborhoods, and we're doing that. We've got a full-time recruiting team who's going all across the country to make the case of why officers should come. This is a hard time to be the police, probably the hardest in the history of our country. And every mayor that I know across the country is facing the challenges of recruiting for the police force. But we've got a very specific plan that we're executing. I get a weekly update in my meeting with CPD, and we're focused on officer wellness. We are in a challenging time where too many people, violent, dangerous people, do not respect the police. And frankly, we've seen officers being shot at, even ones that are fully in uniform, in a marked car. And so we've got to make sure that we're protecting and taking care of them. So we made a big investment in officer wellness through last year's budget. We've tripled the amount of money that we put into mental health services. And we're reaching exponentially more people through a neighborhood and citywide strategy. We're continuing, obviously, to make sure that we're making the right investments to protect the city from COVID. And I got to give hats off to our public health department. They were the most prepared public health department in the country, and they kept people safe through this pandemic. And I can't say enough about their heroic work.
Could you speak a bit about the pension situation, Mayor?
I'd love to speak more about the pension. Look, here's what I will say about that. We know what the solutions are. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. We did the work 10 plus years ago. I say we, but Members of the General Assembly and the previous governor did that work 10 years ago. It went up to the Illinois Supreme Court and got shot down. But the court told us exactly what we needed to do to fix this. The current state of play is simply unsustainable. And it's distressing to me as a mayor with 4 pension funds, all of which are severely underfunded, that no one in Springfield is talking about the pension beast. This is eating up revenues and resources. Now, we're in a better situation in Chicago than other cities across the state, but if you look at other cities in our state, they've cut expenses, they've cut services, they've done layoffs, they've done all the things that were necessary, and they're out of options without real, meaningful reforms. Now, I believe that pensions are a promise. I grew up as a kid in Ohio in the 60s and 70s when so many men, mostly men, that were in the steel mills lost their pensions when the steel mills tanked. So I don't think you can yank the carpet out from under people who organized their whole lives around the expectation that they were going to get a pension. But for the new workers, this has got to be a new day. And we're one of the 3 states in the nation that doesn't tax pension earnings. That doesn't make any sense. So there's a lot of solutions that we could have on the table. We've got to have organized labor as our partner. In my conversations with them, they understand the necessity, but it's a little bit like a game of chicken. Nobody wants to go first. But I can tell you, if I'm fortunate enough to get a second term, I'll be leading the charge. We've got to get pensions right in this state, period, full stop.
Thank you. So we have a question about skilling Chicagoans for technology jobs that can help them enter the middle class. Maybe more broadly, what is the city doing to encourage startups to invest in and expand the tech ecosystem?
Well, look, I think a couple of things. We have an incredibly dynamic tech community here in Chicago. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It is absolutely tier 1. Last year, we minted 12 unicorns. Most of them were in one technology sector or another. So we've got all of the elements here. What we hear over and over again from our tech community is a couple of things. One, we need a pipeline of talent. We need to make sure that our young people know that they can have dynamic, interesting, innovative careers in the tech sector here, and they don't have to go to the coast to be able to do that. So I think that's a critical thing, and we're working to make sure that we're doing that. I also think, frankly, and I'll take the tech piece for the life sciences, there's a lot of really innovative things that are happening in universities, and you know that. What we need to do is forge a closer relationship with you, the university community, to support those businesses. So again, you don't think you got to go to Boston or the Research Triangle or to Silicon Valley, that we have the ecosystem here to support that work, and that's entirely what we're doing. We're also, frankly, going around the country. We started last year in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. We've been to LA, we've been to Boston, we've been to New York, Miami. I'm going to Texas next week, in particular Austin and Houston, to carry the gospel of what's happening here in Chicago and to recruit, frankly, businesses, even if they're not moving here wholesale. If you're thinking about your second headquarters, Chicago needs to be in that conversation. So those are some of the things that we're doing with Mark Tebby and World Business Chicago to make sure that people know that Chicago should be part of that conversation and the reasons why.
So, Babe, the question has come up about climate change, and I know you announced last year a climate action plan.
Yep.
We had an earlier question about sustainability. Maybe you could speak to your views on that and what the city could and should be doing.
Look, I think that we've got to take climate action and sustainability to the next level. We have a chief sustainability officer. Just last week, we announced our climate action plan to make sure that as a city, and frankly challenging businesses to take the next step on reducing their carbon footprint, being much more conscious of how we are investing in cleaner technologies, what we need to do to support the green jobs that are available. I want us to be build a real infrastructure for electric cars. I think those are really critically important for us to do. So we've got a comprehensive plan that we're executing, and I can't believe I neglected to say our most valuable asset, of course, is our beautiful lake. So we're working as a region, and by a region I mean the entire St. Lawrence Seaway region. We meet, and we've frankly assumed, I think, our proper role there during my administration, working with our federal delegation, particularly our senior senator, Dick Durbin, to make sure that we're protecting our shoreline. We've gotten some good news, which I'll hold the announcement on federal investments along that way, but we've got to make sure that we're stepping up and doing more, protecting communities that are growing, that are living near post-industrial brownfields. So we've got a lot of things that we're doing, but we're very focused on making Chicago a model for the nation when it comes to sustainability. And a big part of our $1.2 billion budget last year was the largest, $188 million, the largest investment in the economy in the city's history. And I'll talk briefly about my favorite part of it is we're going to plant 75,000 trees to really enhance and improve and replenish our tree canopy here in the city of Chicago. And I'm very excited about that work as well.
We have a question about the Whole Foods model didn't work in Englewood. Any thoughts on that and what might be a better model?
Well, I'll choose my words carefully here. Since that investment was not made on my watch. Look, the practical reality is that if you look at what's happening in Englewood, there's a lot of progress that's being made, but it remains one of the poorest neighborhoods in our city. And having a Whole Foods in that neighborhood where steak prices are $15 a pound, that's a stretch for most people. It's out of reach for that community. I've been to that Whole Foods many, many times, pre-mayor, and while I have been a mayor. In fact, I went there last Saturday morning. I was there at 9:30. I like grocery shopping, but I was there to talk to the workers and try to be present for them. 9:30 in the morning in a grocery store on a Saturday, that's usually the high time. Lots of people there, people wanting to get their grocery shopping done and then get on with their Saturday. When I went into that store, there was literally not a single customer there. And that to me really speaks volumes. So we're going to make sure that we make the right investment to replace that. We're going to make sure that those workers are taken care of. But the lesson of that Whole Foods is you can't go in community with a solution that they haven't asked for. You've got to go in community with a humble heart and a listening ear. And many times you're going to get your butt kicked, and I know that well. But you can't do for community without talking to the community on the front end and saying, how can we help? What are your needs? How can we be a partner with you in that work? I think the reason why our Invest Southwest program, now $1.4 billion in commitments, has been so successful is because we spent an enormous amount of time on the front end talking with community about what they wanted to see in the investments and how that would transform the topography for them. That has to be the model of investments everywhere. That was not done when that Whole Foods was announced. It was a big splashy announcement, but it's not surprising that it failed. It was frankly a question of when, not if.
So we have a great question about COVID again and how it's hitting the arts sector pretty hard. And of course, Chicago, live theater, music, performing arts, these are bedrock ideas in Chicago. And can you speak more about initiatives to maybe?
Sure. Look, our arts and culture sector, I think, is really second to none. And I recognize, I'm probably talking to folks in this audience or maybe from New York and other places. We have an incredibly dynamic arts and culture community in Chicago, and they were devastated by COVID. Now, there were federal monies that came, state monies that came, we put monies in, but I'll tell you a couple things that we've done. Number one is our arts and culture funding was tied to the hotel tax. Well, guess what happened to hotels over the last 2 years? They weren't open. So our hotel revenue plummeted. And that meant that the primary funding stream for arts and culture in our city was just devastated. It wasn't there. So one of the commitments that I made to our Arts and Culture Committee, and we have a very robust and diverse Arts Advisory Council, is that we would shift away from the hotel tax to a permanent line item in our city budget, and we did that this year. So that has provided substantial boost for funding. We need to make sure, we've got, excuse me, all the high-end institutions, an incredible art institute, our Museum of Contemporary Art. I challenge you to find one that's more dynamic. Our museums, whether it's our Shedd Aquarium, Adler, or Field Museum, Museum of Science and Industry, we've got great, diverse, dynamic museums. But we also need to make sure that we help our artists and the neighborhood arts institutions as well. We've been on the front lines fighting the fight with our independent music venues, which again are incredibly dynamic. They got themselves highly organized nationally, really started with the groundswell here in Chicago, spread out across the nation. They now have a national organization, and they lobbied and got monies from ARP to help uplift those independent venues, and we've been, I think, a tremendous partner for them and lobbying with our federal delegation to make sure that happens. Just in the downtown area alone, just to give you a data point, there was a study that was done a few years back that just the downtown arts and culture institutions in Chicago are $1 billion a year industry. When you think about not only the revenues that are generated, the people that come from all across the world to see and experience arts and culture just downtown, so that you spread that out across our neighborhoods, that's real dough, folks. So we need to make sure that they are thriving, that we are supporting them, and we're totally committed to doing that.
Thank you, Mayor. So a question about inflation, which is a national problem, local problem as well. What, if anything, are you able to do to help reduce that burden?
Well, look, we have limited tools at the municipal level, as you might know, but we're doing a couple of things. We have launched the largest income targeted financial assistance program in the country. It's $31 million. We look to help 5,000 families with $500 a month for a year. But I'm a firm believer that you also have to teach people to fish. And so part of that program is doing a pretty significant case management diagnostic of each of those families that we're going to be helping them with financial literacy, but also understanding why is it that they are struggling. I came from one of those families. I know what it means where you're trying to juggle bills from one to another and not having really any space. And one unexpected bill can be catastrophe. And unfortunately, there are too many people in our city that are experiencing that. And just to give you an important data point, we opened up the application process a week ago, and on the very first day, keep in mind, 5,000 families, but on the very first day, we had over 90,000 applications. So that tells you that people are hurting, and we've got to help them. So we're doing a number of different things, but fundamentally, what do we need to do as a city? We need to grow jobs. We need to have affordability. We need to make sure that we've got good, solid schools, because as we all know, education is a great equalizer. We've got to do the short-term things to help people over this hump, but we've got to build great, dynamic, strong, vibrant neighborhoods with good jobs and opportunity so that people can take care of themselves and build and transfer wealth. That's critically important.
So Mayor, you mentioned education, and we have a question saying college enrollment is at an all-time low, particularly community colleges. And is that something you've thought about, like a plan to combat these sorts of declining enrollments there?
Well, yes, we're aware of that. And community colleges, to me, I think have to be part of the equation and how we're building opportunities for folks to build wealth. Our community colleges are vibrant and strong. We've got a great dynamic leader in Chancellor Juan Salgado, and I think one of the things that is a great strength that he has brought to the community colleges is bringing industry, our industry, into the community colleges. That's critically important, so that employers see our students for whom they are: great, strong, smart, innovative, and diverse. And he has done a lot of programs getting our city colleges kids to get, I call them kids since I'm 1,000 years older than most of them, getting them opportunities for internships, apprenticeships, and also one of the things that he's done is forming relationships with colleges and universities in Illinois, so that those 2 years of city colleges work, that associate degree, gives them a pathway for admittance into colleges and universities. So there's a lot that's going on at our city colleges, making sure that there's a connection with the jobs of today and tomorrow, but also making sure that for those that want to go on to further their education, that there's a clear pathway, because there's a relationship with the four-year colleges and universities to be able to do that.
We have a question about your thoughts on universal basic income, and is that something that could...
So that's what I was talking
with the
about.
plan.
Our $31 million plan is our version of UBI. But frankly, we're trying to learn the lessons from a lot of other cities. This will be the largest program of its kind in the nation. And as I said, it's critically important to us that the people that go through this program have a leg up a year later when the program ends, so that they're able then to be better situated financially than they were when they went into it. We don't want to just pass out $500 a month checks and then at the end of it say, well, thanks for the memories. We want these folks to be on a better, clearer path, and I believe it's University of Chicago, one of your labs is going to be evaluating the program to help us develop a plan for the future to help a broader array of folks.
So Mayor, stepping back, could you talk about what companies do you think are doing interesting things in Chicago?
Wait, you're going to make me name names. And
well,
I'm going to get myself
you
in
could say
trouble,
company A, company B, something like that.
No, I'll name names.
All right.
I
knew you would.
I'm not shy, as you probably figured out. I think there are a couple. One that I want to make sure that you know, it's called Nature's Find. This is a remarkable story. One of our 12 unicorns last year. And what they are doing is creating new bio-food that is a meat substitute. You're going to be able to find their products in Dominick's, and Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, all over the city. And they're doing everything from meat replacement, dairy replacement, and the most amazing thing is they're doing it in the back of the yards, in the old stockyards. So the food of today and tomorrow is being created in the old meat packing era of the jungle that put Chicago on the map as the hog butcher of the world. That place is now one of the most exciting food and ag companies I think in the country, and certainly in Chicago. Let me talk about Discover Financial, which is I think a tremendous success story. You may recall a few years back, probably 4 or 5 years ago, I got myself in trouble when I named the name, so I won't, but a retailer that all of us probably shop at shut down 2 sites, one in Chatham and one in the Morgan Park neighborhood on the far south side. They just left. Virtually no notice, didn't take care of their workers, and left a gaping hole physically and psychologically in those neighborhoods. Discover Financial got a great dynamic CEO, Roger Hausfeld, and he was looking for a location to put a call center. He chose Chicago, and he chose one of those abandoned retailers, big, huge space. Long story short, he brought a call center to that neighborhood, high paying. They have the same benefit package as he does, has the opportunity to get college paid for by the company. That call center now, a year in, is the highest performing call center in the Discover network. He's now bringing yet another wave of jobs, technology jobs, to that same location, and has transformed that neighborhood. And something like 60% of the people that work there are from the surrounding neighborhood. Those are the kind of civic leaders that are betting on Chicago, that are making a huge difference in our city. I'll talk about Joe Mansueto. Some of you know him as the founder of Morningstar. Well, Joe's often doing other ventures, including running the Chicago Fire professional soccer team, which is making a big investment in Chicago by locating its headquarters, all of its practice facilities, starting a junior league just south of Taylor Street in the city. But one of the things that Joe did is he was a lead investor of something called the Terminal. This is in one of our Invest Southwest neighborhoods on the west side. And this was an old furniture company, and the developer had been struggling to try to find an investor to support the work. They wanted to change this into an incubator for businesses. Joe Mansueto, frankly, answered the call and challenge that I made to the business community, became the lead investor in the Terminal, and that incubator space is now really thriving and has the first quantum computing manufacturing company in the country, but certainly in Chicago, that is now one of the anchor tenants to that terminal space. So I could go on and on, but the point is, we've got great civic leadership in the city. People who understand the need that they got to put their money where their mouth is, and we're seeing success after success because of that.
Joe, of course, is a Booth alum, as is the current CEO, Kunal, so just throw that out there.
I didn't know that, but now I do.
So Mayor, we have a minute left, so maybe let me ask you, what are the things 5 to 10 years down the road, what are the industries that you want the city to be known for? And also, 10 years down the road, what would you like to look back on and think of as the legacy that you've accomplished?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, I want to make sure that the strengths of what we are seeing now continue to flourish. Again, our tech center, our tech community, we're not as far, obviously, into this as the folks in Boston or the Research Triangle, but in 5 to 10 years, there's no reason why we can't be there. Our life sciences industry has really taken off. I mentioned food and ag. I think that's a core strength. We're always going to be a great manufacturing town. We're always going to be TD&L. But I also want, frankly, us to be thinking about, as we are, what are the jobs of tomorrow? I really think, we talk about the green economy, but I think we have a real opportunity here, particularly when it comes to electric vehicles, building that infrastructure. I'd love to see us really weigh in and have electric battery plants, either in Chicago or in a surrounding area. I mean, that to me is the wave of the future. So I think there's a wave of opportunity that we can invest in, and our folks are thinking about that now with the great innovators and entrepreneurs in our city.
So we're out of time. So I wanted to just thank you for taking the time to come
Sure.
here today and for your openness and transparency and candor in answering such a wide variety of questions. I think I learned a lot, and I think the audience definitely did. So thank you very much, Mayor.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.